Hi, and welcome back to Extra, your weekly LGBTQIA+ news roundup in which I serve you all the tea so that you don't have to do the deep diving yourself. In today's video, we will be taking a little trip to Mexico, Hungary, and the UK. We've got quite a bit in the culture segment to talk about. We don't have a sports segment this week, but we do have a tiny little talking point in religion. And then at the end of the video, as always, I'll be serving you your slay and also your ew of the week. If this is your first time joining me, thank you so much for clicking on my video. I hope you enjoy this content. If you do, give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. And if this isn't your first time here, thank you so much for being here again. I appreciate you. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, Hungary's government is planning on issuing a sort of informal survey to their population, which apparently is something that they do every now and again. The reason we're talking about this one today is because it's asking specifically about EU topics, about LGBTQIA+ topics, and about budget questions in terms of supporting the war in Ukraine. Historically, around about 20% of the population take part in these types of surveys, and we all know that the people with the strongest opinions are going to be the people taking part. Knowing Hungary's history and the fact that their current government is very right-wing, I would assume that anybody being outspokenly left might be faced with consequences, and so under all of these circumstances, you'll inevitably have a part of the population disproportionately loudly answering these surveys, and yet the government is using these skewed statistics in order to leverage any plans that they have. Ew. Really, the whole thing is kind of an orchestrated attempt at propaganda. The whole thing stinks a lot of Brexit. And it's not a good smell, let me tell you, from someone who lives in the UK.
Oh man, bad idea, jeans.
The direction of this survey in Hungary is kind of steering that same way of, oh, the EU isn't doing anything for us and they're only taking our money and all that stuff. Being in the EU comes with certain prerequisites. A country has to tick certain boxes in order to be able to join the European Union, and some of these boxes are just maintaining certain human rights laws, freedom of speech. There's some very basic stuff, and Hungary over the last few years has been violating quite a few of those laws, and because of that hasn't received the funding that the EU promises its member countries. But it's a two-way street, right? You uphold the tick boxes, you get your funding.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you raised in a household with no consequences?
But again, the Hungarian government is currently using the fact that they haven't been paid as leverage to rally their people against the EU. And it's the same thing that happened in the UK, essentially, is that this extremely one-sided view of, oh, the EU does nothing for us and wants us to do all of these things. But you knew the deal when you signed up. And there's a lot of upsides to being an EU member, which is why you wanted to join in the first place. Those things haven't changed. It's just that extremist governments use this hate steering towards whatever their scapegoat of the week is to rally their people against something.
I know what'll impress everybody. I'll start a fire.
Jesus Ociel Baena Salsado, Mexico's first out non-binary judge, has been found dead alongside their partner in their home. Salcedo was a very outspoken and loudly queer person and LGBTQ+ activist who ignited a lot of change in Mexico in terms of LGBT legislation and rights and visibility of the community. And of course, you know, something that comes with having a platform of any sort is that people disagreeing with you will be very loud too. They'd been receiving a lot of death threats and threats of violence, and it's not entirely clear yet, I hope, whether this was an attack from the outside. Police reports have said there isn't any proof of a third party kind of breaking and entering. I think personally that it's really likely that it was an attack from the outside, and whoever did it just was really smart about how they let themselves into the home and left no traces. I doubt that somebody who, I mean, you never know with mental health, right? But Salcedo recently had a lot of success. They were the first person to receive a non-binary Mexican passport. They were a very influential voice with a big platform, and I don't think that it was an accident, and I also don't think it was a domestic fight. But I am going to be following this story with great interest and hope that the police find out more. In the UK, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak reshuffled the cabinet this week, and for the first time in a pretty long time, there are no LGBTQ plus cabinet members in the UK. And also for the first time in many years, there are no women in any of the 4 top positions in the cabinet. This is particularly relevant now because trans issues are so at the forefront of everything and have been named as one of the top things people will be talking about and thinking about in this next election.
Yeah. Oh.
So it's a clear decision to not include LGBT people. I personally do think that governing bodies should represent the population as accurately as possible. It's not always possible, right, to have the exact ratio of any certain ethnic group and any certain sexuality represented in a body of government, but there's a spectrum between perfectly accurate proportional representation and nobody, right? And if we could just land somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, that would be great. This new cabinet does not do that. But there is good news. So Suella Braverman has been fired as Home Secretary after saying some really horrible things about both the LGBTQ plus community and migrant issues. She's just a very hateful woman, and I'm always baffled at how somebody with an immigration background themselves can stir such hate against migrants.
Ew.
Other things about this cabinet reshuffling are confusing, not just to me, but to other people. For one, David Cameron is back. David Cameron, who you may remember as the guy who sold you Brexit, and then when he won the Brexit vote was like, oops, sorry, bye.
I don't want to work. I just want to bang on this mug all day.
And incredibly, he is back as the Foreign Secretary. So I guess now that other people have cleaned up his Brexit mess for him, now he's back.
Sound good? Doesn't matter.
Steve Barclay is now the Environment Secretary, and he was formerly the Health Secretary. Again, how the two connect is unclear to me, but it is good news for queer people and especially trans people that Steve Barclay is no longer the Health Secretary, because he has a really horrible and nasty view on trans rights and how he thinks trans people in need of medical treatment should be treated. So we're glad he's no longer in charge of health. I'm not sure how glad we are that he is in charge of environment, because something tells me that somebody who doesn't believe in trans rights also doesn't believe in climate change. But, you know, we'll find out. Honestly, when the focus is queer news, reporting on politics just feels like one big fucking dumpster fire, doesn't it? Currently, at least. But, you know, it's important to talk about it. It's important to stay informed. And better times are a-coming, I hope. And until then, we need to know what we're up against.
Never let the bastards get you down.
So, let's move on to culture, where things are a lot more lighthearted. Pink has promised fans that she will be distributing copies of banned books during her tour dates in Florida, with censorship laws sweeping the US currently, which is also just so wild to me. Really? Censorship? In the modern day and age? Really? My own feelings aside, for a moment,
I just have a lot of feelings.
You know, the US has come a long way with racism and homophobia, but it's also important to remember it's not that long ago. I keep seeing posts on social media that are like, you know, the first Black girl to go to an all-white school in America is 69 today. That's not old. That's not old. You know, I mean, let's take World War II as a reference. World War II is now 80 years ago, nearly, which means that the youngest people who fought in World War II would now be approaching 100 if they're still alive. The civil rights movement in America was more recent than World War II. So it's also not ancient history. We need to talk about it. So the fact that books about race and racism and the history of racism, as well as books about queer families and that it's normal to be gay, are being banned from schools and libraries is wild to me. There's always an agenda behind governments censoring things, right? What is it that they don't want you to see? What is it that they don't want you to know? And why? Because an ignorant people is more easy to manipulate, you know? People won't be able to spot what they don't know, and people won't be as free or as powerful in their own being without certain tools. Celebrities using their platform for good and to educate people and to defy injustice is just a wonderful thing. So, big snaps to Pink, which is also why today's video is pink. Yeah. Bobby Berk is leaving Queer Eye.
Oh, Queer Eye. Queer Eye. That's a good show.
After season 8. I'm really sad about that because he's my favorite. I just think he has such a kind of pure, warm energy. And also he's fantastic at his job. The home makeovers are amazing and my favorite part of the show. Yeah, like all the heartfelt stuff is also great. You know, I'm not going to pretend I don't shed a tear whenever people's lives are turned around. But the home makeovers are just... So I'm sad to see Bobby go, and I know there's a lot of rumours online. I don't exactly know what the tea is. Apparently there were feuds going on in the cast. People are conspiring over who was up against whom and who the conflict was in between. I don't know.
She doesn't even go here!
But, you know, even though Queer Eye is a bit cheesy, and I still think it's... For one, it's just a really wholesome watch. It's something you can watch when you're having a bad day and just always be reminded that there is kindness in the world and that people are just trying their best. I think the kindness and the generosity with which the Fab Five approach each person, no matter what their background is or what their opinions are, they're always kind of leading with love. And I also know of real life examples. I think we all have an uncle or a dad or something who has said things like, I just don't understand why they have to be so loud, or who just have some sort of issue with specifically that queer person who is very loud and flamboyant. For example, Jonathan Van Ness. And I have family members myself who, when first introduced to Queer Eye, were a bit like, oh my God, I can't watch that because that person is just so like loud and in my face. But that same family member, a few episodes in, it just kind of clicked to them that that's just how Jonathan is. And it's not a mask that they put on or a kind of costume that they slip into. It's actually just authentically themselves. And once that clicked, my family member was able to just also see Jonathan for the kind and unique soul that they are. And we have to see people who are different from us in order to begin to understand them and where they're coming from. The last thing I want to talk about in today's video is that the Church of England has finally voted to allow same-sex blessings, which is not the exact same as a heterosexual Church of England wedding, but to the untrained eye will essentially look the same and is a huge step forward for the Church of England.
Oh, I did it.
I spoke about the Roman Catholic Church in my last video. I don't need to give you my whole spiel about institutionalized religion. Again, in a nutshell, I am not a fan. If you are, that's great. That's totally fine. We can be on different pages about this. It's all good. But any step towards inclusion from a Christian body is amazing and just means that they're finally arriving in the 21st century. Which brings us to our awards segment, which is my favorite. We have, as always, the of the week, and we also have the of the week. The Slay of the Week goes to singer Pink for using her platform for good, for using the fact that millions of people follow what she's doing and hundreds of thousands go to see her concerts to ignite some social positive change. Yes, Queen. And our ew of the week goes to Viktor Orban and his government, who keep targeting the LGBTQ plus community, even though they've already marginalized them to the very edges of society. Last week, they fired a museum director for allegedly allowing minors to go see photographs in an exhibition that included LGBTQ plus content, which in Hungary it's illegal to make LGBTQ plus content available to minors.
Why are you the way that you are?
To shield them from the very dangerous propaganda, because we all know that seeing two people share a kiss, if they are not a man and a woman, will turn you gay immediately. Or at least that's what, extremely conservative governments seem to think. And just continue to skew the population in their direction and ignite more hate towards a community that is already suffering from lots of prejudice and violence. And for what? Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for watching until the very end if you're still here. Give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, maybe watch one of my previous videos, and I'll catch you soon. Bye.
All right, ciao. Adios.